Yeah, so in regards to your claim that free will is basically some type of feeling that we have, would you agree that you are parodying like epiphenomenalism?
Sorry, what's epiphenomenalism?
Epiphenomenalism is essentially that consciousness is something that is a byproduct of neurosynapses, brain activity, and it's not an emergent property, right? So emergentism is kind of the state of neuroscience right now, and determinism was really couched in epiphenomenalism. So it's an epiphenomenon of brain activity. It's a sense that you're free, but it's not actually you're free. That's called epiphenomenalism.
I think there's a distinction between consciousness in of itself and free will. I think that free will is an illusion, correct? We're still a little bit kind of murky on like the nature of consciousness in of itself, but I do believe that free will is a feeling rather than something that is true, something that you can locate, et cetera. I think that instead it's kind of like our conception of like these processes and like the ways that we interact with the world.
So you're arguing that the only thing that exists is materialism, right?
Like the material world?
The material world, right?
I don't think I have to posit that to make my claim. Not necessarily. I'm simply
Well, I'm asking, what is your claim? Are you a materialist?
I don't think I have to, like, I haven't completely refined, like, my ideas on kind of, like, materialism versus idealism. I would probably be a materialist, but I don't think I have to, that entails this conversation or it's necessary for the conversation. So.
Well, the idea is if you're assuming materialism or any sort of epiphenomenal understanding of free will as some type of experience that's not rooted in actual consciousness or human agency, it's a circular argument because you're appealing to materialism, your brain, to come up with the universal truth statement that everything is determined.
Hold on, I'm not appealing to the brain. I'm saying that like...
Now, how do you come to your knowledge claims?
Okay, so I'm saying that our brain interacts with our environment, right? And that is what creates our wants and desires. And those two things, like for example,
That's compatibilism.
No, that's not. That's how like people make decisions, right?
But so that's called compatibilism.
No. So compatibilism is the idea that free will is when you act in accordance with your wants.
Yes, that are shaped by the external environment.
Yeah, and then
that's exactly what you just said.
Yeah, and then, determinists also say, right, that we are also shaped by our wants, but free will does not mean that you act in accordance with your will. It means that you would have some agency in the moment to do whatever you want. In regards to like compatibilism versus determinism, we actually agree on the same facts of reality. We just define free will differently. So yeah, compatibilists would also say, yeah, you're a product of your environment and your biology, just as a determinist would.
Yeah. They just changed the semantic word of freedom, and they say that you're making choices amongst conditioned responses. That's what compatibilism is.
Okay, awesome. So there's a difference there in like
that's why
what should be determined free will.
Okay. So let's get into epistemology. How do you? So are you believe in objective truth?
That there is objective truth?
Yes.
I would say that like we can't make claims onto reality as it absolutely is. I think that like our kind of faculties...
So isn't that what you're doing right now?
Hold on.
Isn't that what you're doing?
We make assumptions every day, right? That like the world around us exists. So we can do things like science, right? And psychology.
And that's induction,
Yeah, it's an assumption, right? That everyone like acts upon today. We don't really know what the world exists outside, what it looks like outside of a human body. We know that, like, for example, ants don't see the same things as us, neither do, like, insects. Like, even the color schemes that we see are different than animals. So we know that, like, objectively, the world does not look the way that we see it, right? But we assume that it exists to interact with it, for ease, etc. That's how scientists come to conclusions. There are baseline assumptions, right, to engage with any of these practices.
Yeah, but science is also appealing to the laws of logic, the law of identity, and all these different things. I asked you a simple question.
But they all lie on assumptions, yeah.
No, they're not assumptions. So you don't believe that 2 + 2 = 4.
We rely on the...
Does 2 + 2 = 4?
We rely on the assumption.
Does 2 + 2 = 4?
Can I answer your question? Because I don't want it to be a debate where like you're going to interrupt me and we can't have like fruitful discussion.
Awesome. If we can, just allow people to finish their...
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So relying on the assumption that everything around us exists and things of that nature, I completely agree that there is some truth that we can find. But you must agree upon reality as the basis, right?
So, regarding objective truth, I want to just hammer down what exactly your epistemology is.
My epistemology?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that in general, I don't think we can say that something is objectively true because I don't think we can truly see reality as it truly is because we already know that our faculties of experience, our senses are set in some way that we know other animals already don't have, right? So we can only trust like the human experience and like what like patterns that we recognize across the human mind, but we don't exactly know what it could look like outside of a human faculty of like perception. Do you understand what that means?
Yeah, which means that you just refuted yourself to make it. You're making universal claims right now.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
No, so this debate...
You're making universal claims.
We're not having... Okay.
You just said free will doesn't exist. Now you're cutting me off. So why don't you stop and just relax for a second? Because what you did is you just fundamentally contradicted yourself by saying that all we do is we have experiences of our environment. We really can't make universal truth claims. And then you're coming here to actually make a universal truth claim by saying free will doesn't exist, or free will is just an experience, or free will is epiphenomenal. And therefore, you've already undermined your own epistemological foundation, and leads to the inability to have any sort of rational inquiry.
So for any conversation that you have, usually we have some subliminal assumption that relies within the conversation. For example, if I'm just let's say I love the Hunger Games and I'm like, Katniss is the best. She's the best ever. She is the best huntress ever, whatever. You could be like, oh, you're making a universal truth claim. Oh, no. But actually, in that conversation,
that's a preference.
What is entailed,
that's
right?
a preference.
Yeah, right? That's a preference, but it's a statement.
No,
right? It assumes that she's a person.
You realize there's a difference between universal truth claims and preferences,
can I finish
right?
my point?
Let her finish.
Thank you.
Let her finish.
Right, so in that conversation, there's an assumption made that we're presuming that, we're making the presumption that these people, exist at some sense, I guess, of being fictional characters, right? But there's an assumption there that you're making. So I think the most correct way to say that would be assuming or knowing that she's a fictional character, Katniss is the best huntress ever, right? But whenever we're in a conversation, whether it be metaphysical, whether it be philosophical, political, there are some underlying assumptions made to make any claim. The underlying assumption with this claim that I'm making is that free will is an illusion, right? That's
a universal claim.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
You just said it's an illusion.
What is a universal claim?
A universal claim is when you make a fact or a truth claim that is universal.
Yeah, no. So it would also mean
that. Yeah, that's what it is.
Do you think so?
That's what it is.
Do you see it as synonymous with absolute claims? Do you see there's a distinction
between
absolute claims and universal claims?
Those would be the same thing. An absolute claim would be universal.
Right. So I would make a claim if you want to make it synonymous with something that just has to be true. I think that we don't know that anything has to be true unless we presume that this reality as we live in it is true. Do you understand that?
Yeah, but you just said there's no point in a debate.
I never said there's no point in the debate.
Your premise, the worldview, every paradigm has premises and presuppositions built into it. This is called presuppositionalism. And so your presuppositions contradict the ability to make the claims that you're making.
You understand that scientists do this all the time, right?
It doesn't.
Scientists presume
you don't
that
have
we
a
can
worldview
make
that
some
allows science.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
Scientists acknowledge this. Yeah, they do.
No, I'm very aware.
Do you know what the law of causality is?
Oh, yeah, I know what the law of.
Okay, what's the law of causality?
You tell me. You're the one that's bringing it up, right? You're the one that has it written down on her paper here, so she can look down and read the definition.
Okay, it is here, but
exactly.
Yeah, people, you have notes.
These are outlines for your worldview.
They're different.
I don't have definitions written down.
Okay. Anyway, the law of causality essentially says that every event has some cause, right? If it doesn't have a cause, it's random, right? We make all these claims assuming that we can make some type of statements on reality, presuming that it exists, right? Scientists must presume that reality exists to make the claims that they do. So in the circumstances of this debate, I'm going to presume that reality exists, and therefore I'm going to make the claim that any event is either caused or uncaused. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but it's still, you have no epistemological foundation to make an actual claim.
Epistemology has to do with what we can know.
You're a senior. I have a PhD. I actually know exactly what epistemology is.
So it's the study of knowledge, what we can know, et cetera, right?
Exactly.
So even in that gives us a framework for knowledge, right? It is the framework that we use.
And I'm saying that you can't make universal knowledge claims within that paradigm.
I don't think I am making a universal knowledge claim.
Does free will exist?
No.
Okay, then that is a claim. So at no point
presuming that reality exists, yes.
At no point right now, in the future, in the past, free will has existed, correct?
No.
It has or hasn't?
It doesn't exist.
Okay, that is called a universal truth claim. So you just made a universal truth claim. You just contradicted the fundamental premise of your worldview.
That claim exists overlying the foundation, this idea that reality exists, right? But that's an assumption, right? So we make baseline assumptions that you exist, that I exist, that I'm not hallucinating right now.
So your whole presentation is an assumption.
Yeah, it's just like we do this every day.
No, it's not, because I believe in the laws of logic.
You can say that you know that you're not a brain in a vat right now, right? right? And I don't think that you are, right? I choose to believe that you're not, because all the evidence I have, like navigating this world, right, points to the fact that we all exist, that we're all agents, right, et cetera, right? So I make this presumption, but it's a very, very testable presumption, and it's almost fact. Like gravity is also a theory, but I believe in gravity because it's testable, right? So just because something is an assumption does not mean that we can't use it or that it's not justifiable in any way.
Yeah, it does actually mean that
Do you
it's
not
not
believe in gravity?
That's not.
Do you
of course,
believe in
I believe in gravity.
But
That's a non sequitur. It's a really dumb argument that you're making. So what?
Okay, so you understand theories can like hold
But
true.
theories can actually be built on logical basis.
Yes, and so does this one.
Okay, so where do you? So how do the laws of logic exist? Because these are non-physical things. Yeah. I'm curious what your cosmology is, because if you believe in the Big Bang, and you believe in material evolution ever since then you can't appeal to things like what are called philosophical transcendentals. You can't appeal to the laws of logic. You can't appeal to number theory. You can't appeal to all these different things because they're non-physical and they're universal and they're unchanging. You can't have Let me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish.
You're right. I'm sorry.
You can't have non-changing, non-physical things in an entirely materialist universe. This is a known thing.
I'm not posing any idea of like a non-changing thing.
That's my point.
Okay.
That's exactly my point.
Awesome.
Do you understand?
So
what do you think my argument is? Because it doesn't sound like
that free will exists and that we are causal agents.
Without free will, there is no reason.
Right,
Rationality depends upon the
true.
ability to choose between things.
Yeah, right. So I think that human beings can develop rationality and pattern recognition, but the cause for that is determined, right? You can someone can learn and learn to read patterns or learn to make connections to things, but the causes for that person to get to that point of neuroplasticity is determined. That's what I'm saying. So you can have a want, you can have a desire, you can act on that desire. You can be forced against acting on your desire, but those desires are things that you don't choose. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and my point is that if that's the case, then being here and trying to persuade people to your worldview makes no sense.
Do you have any contention with the actual view, though? Because
I've laid out. I laid out multiple points about how your paradigm makes no. Let me finish. You just talked. Let me finish.
No, I didn't get to finish. You kept speaking.
What?
I think it was her turn to talk. Let her finish, and then go ahead, David. Or sorry, Patrick. My mistake. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So my view is that, which you haven't attacked whatsoever, is that wants, right, are not coming from this individual. Instead, we can find some type of cause, right, that extends outside the person, that terminates outside the person, right? Yeah. Do you have an argument against that?
Yeah. Actually, multiple neuroscience experiments has demonstrated that, again, dealing with Libet and dealing with these resting potentials has shown that people can actually prevent a series of, or a cascade effect from the actions occurring, which demonstrates a sense of agency. This is why you are not in step with the contemporary neuroscience. You're not in step in contemporary psychology. You referred to psychology earlier. Those fields do not uphold a deterministic worldview. No, they do not.
So no one's saying,
they do not. And so
no one's saying that, for example, we can have a lot of people in poverty that are born into poverty and persist in that cycle. And you can have a couple people rise out of that poverty by some mechanisms, right? People can act that's in ways that seem to be unpredicted, but we're saying that reason that they did choose or did not act in the way that most people did is also determined. For example, let's say you're born into poverty, but you had an IQ of 130, right? So you're just smarter than the average person. You're able to excel at school better than other people, and thus you somehow became a millionaire. We're saying that the reason that you were able to rise up out of that position is not because you just pulled yourself out of your bootstraps, but because your IQ was higher than the average person, and that predicted success. That's what we're saying.
Okay, but still, I'm not arguing that external conditions don't affect people's lives and have influence in people. Of course it does.
I'm saying that's what makes a person do.
Yeah, I'm saying it's not. And there's multiple. Let me finish. And there's multiple examples. And so even the entire ascetic tradition of monasticism and people actually renouncing and struggling against passions would actually insinuate that agency, free will and human agency exist, and that they're not totally dependent on external factors that are determining what they do here or there, and demonstrates. And this is where the latest research in neuroscience actually is.
So no one's saying
tell me what experiments in neuroscience validate, because I'm literally looked at all the research.
The entire nature and nurture debate. If like the cause of someone's action does not come from their nurture, it comes from their nature, right? So this could be biology. This could be like, for example, we can look at like Phineas Gage, I believe his name is. He had like some type of pole that like went through his eye and through his prefrontal cortex. I think it was around his amygdala, and it caused him, right, to act erratically, and it caused him to act impulsively, and he was doing things that we consider bad. The reason why is because there's something in the brain, right, that controls your impulses, that controls your social ability, etc., right? And so it kind of comes down to, again, these things that you inherit, right, biologically. Sometimes, though, like it also comes from things like socialization. If you're in a household that is abusive, you can end up finding yourself acting in ways that are socially uncohesive, in ways that we don't want. So I'm saying that even if someone does rise against what we call their biology or their socialization, the result is, or the reason always comes from they're either one or the other, the biology or the social.
So why is the abuse bad?
Because I personally don't think that it's okay to.
So it's just a personal belief. It's just your preference that abuse is bad.
I think that. So are we going to switch to a morality debate, or do you want to stay on the
It's
topic
all the same thing.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No,
It all, again, there's only three legs to
it's not.
worldviews.
This is
okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, then go into morality.
No, I don't want to go into morality.
Yeah,
We're talking about
we
free
are.
will.
We are.
No, this is a free will debate.
Exactly. Well, morality entails free will. What are you talking about?
No, you don't have to talk about
Yes,
morality.
you do.
You do not need to talk about
Yes,
that
you
ethics.
do.
This is like, you can talk about this from a purely neuroscience like level, or you can talk about it from philosophy.
You're not. You can't come here and debate determinism
Yes,
and then refuse to even engage with morality and ethical discussions.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So I feel like I haven't been able to. What causes people to act the way that they do?
It's a series of factors. They have their own human agency. Again,
Can
nurture
you explain
and
that? Any proof or evidence of that?
Will you let me freaking talk? I mean, I say one sentence and you're already cutting me off.
Let them finish if you can. Go ahead.
So again, there's multiple factors that contribute to the way that people exist in the world. Human agency, again, nature and nurture. All these things are included. It's not one or the other. And the idea that we have to just restrict our defense to just one particular one, that's ridiculous. That's not how the world works. It's both and.
Okay.
There's multiple factors that contribute, that shape to a human person, their parents, trauma, environment, genetics, all these things are included, but that doesn't deny that people have human agency and free will. And so if free will doesn't exist, you cannot make any moral claim because nobody is morally responsible, nobody is ethically responsible. And this would be true for the history of injustices, this would be true for the patriarchy.
So I just want to keep...
Can I finish a thought? That would be true for patriarchy, that would be true for SA, that would be true for reparations, that would be true for slavery. All these things entail that there is some type of moral arbiter that differentiates between good and bad.
Okay.
Your worldview does not allow that to even occur.
What is this human agency? Like, can you just define it for me? I'm clueless. What is that?
Yeah, for me as a Christian, it's being made in the image of God, Genesis 1:26.
All right, so it's every human has this human agency. It means you're made in the image of God.
Correct.
And God gives you this human agency, correct?
Being made in the image of God, yes.
All right, so if every person gets this human agency, they're given at birth, essentially, right? So what makes some people's human agency act differently than other people's?
We just said there's a whole contributing list of factors.
All right, so the other factors you labeled had to do with nature and nurture, the biology and the environment. You talked about
those
parents.
are included.
Right, so if these two things that we agreed already are fixed, right, our biology.
They're not fixed.
Yes, they are. You don't control the biology that you inherit.
Your environment changes.
Do you control the biology that you inherit?
Well, biology.
Yes or no?
Biology is fixed.
Okay,
your environment is not fixed because you can change environments.
So
that was a dumb argument. That was a dumb argument.
Let each other finish. Go ahead, finish.
That was a dumb argument because biology, but we're talking about nature and nurture, and so environments can actually change.
Okay, so your biology is fixed, right? So what would make someone want to change their environment? Just like, give me an example.
They want new scenery.
Why would they want new scenery?
You tell me. You have to ask them.
No.
You have to ask them.
Okay, right. So if we were look at the reason why someone has a preference for new scenery, we can look at things like just like what they're like kind of exposed to at a young age. For example, like if they grew up around beaches, maybe they would like beaches. Or it could just be like the things that they've been shown like through TV, media, etc. All the stimuli. However, at this young age, where all these core beliefs are being like kind of taught to you and instilled in you, you don't control any of that, right? Your preferences are made at this like a younger age. We see this idea of core beliefs come up a lot in psychology, where like your deepest beliefs about society and yourself, who you are, this illusion of free will and the self comes about a lot of times when you're younger, right? So even now when you have the agency now to change environment, which you don't really have that agency when you're like 2 years old, let's say you're like 20 and you can move, that preference that we're talking about to change scenery or to fly to Paris comes from determined, right, like circumstances. That's what we're saying. In any given event, we keep asking why you wanted this thing or why you did this thing. It is either coming from like some internal, like some nurture, right? Something like that has been like experienced, or from someone's biology. That's what we're saying. And once again, this human agency, you haven't explained in any regard how this thing, like if it's first of all, if it's given to you from God, how is it yours? Like, how did you choose your human agency? Number one. And number two, when we look at how it interacts with your biology, if biology affects your human agency, we know that that's fixed, that's already out of your control once again. So it comes down to the same
That doesn't
problem.
mean that, again, but that's a non sequitur. There's a logical non sequitur to say just because your biology is determined, that limits or curtails all human agency. That makes no sense.
What is human agency? It's your
the
design.
ability to have free will, the ability to make decisions, rational deliberation, moral responsibility,
Can you define
love. These types of things actually insinuate free will.
You're begging the question in defining free will. Free will is free will. Agency is agency.
That's not begging the question.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Human agency and free will mean the same thing. Can you give a distinction?
Exactly. But my
so
point
you're saying
is,
human agency is human agency.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
And you're not explaining any reason why we have that.
Okay, I'll make an easy argument here. You cannot have rational deliberation. You cannot have moral responsibility without human agency and free will.
You definitely
and therefore,
can't have.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
And therefore, you can actually not have a universal epistemology or make universal truth claims. You cannot make moral and ethical truth claims, which is the point, and that's why you're already shying away from getting in any type of moral ethical debate, because you have no leg to stand on in regards to deliberating and differentiating why white people did this in history, why this is bad and this is unjust. You have no basis to actually define those.
Okay, so once again, you still have not proven why it exists. You're saying if it doesn't exist, then this.
Exactly.
That's not an argument
no,
for
that's actually logical.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Anyone can like go ahead and like pull up their
You can't have knowledge without it. You cannot have knowledge. You cannot sit here and make knowledge claims.
A reason would be some type of evidence or proof that something exists.
It's to the exclusion of the opposite.
Nope.
Yes,
let me
is.
Continue. So to give a reason for something would be, oh yeah, human agency exists because we can look at this and this proves it. Or
okay,
we can
neuroscience.
Look at,
the arguments that demonstrate when people reach a threshold, they're able to stop that.
I didn't get to finish. Thank you. So.
God.
Okay. Anyway,
so
when we look at human agency, you have said that the outcome would be blank. We can talk about moral responsibility. I would love to do that, but human agency has still not been evidenced by you. You're saying that neuroscientists have found, right, that I don't actually know how your neuroscience. We can actually talk about your neuroscience claim.
To the exclusion of the opposite. These are using laws of logic, right? So if free will doesn't exist, you can't have knowledge claims. If you can't have knowledge claims, then if there is knowledge, therefore free will exists. That is and again, I can just use easy syllogisms. Do you have a syllogism for determinism? Do you have a logical syllogism that actually demonstrates?
Actually, I do.
Okay,
I have one in relation to God, but I do want to touch on this neuroscience point. How do you think that neuroscience entails or like free will?
Because there's been multiple experiments. This is, again, getting back to David Schroeder's 2012 article, RP as Neural Noise, have demonstrated that when these neurological effects reach the cascade point, that a determinist would say, okay, now they have to do the action. We have multiple experiments to show that people can choose not to. And the fact that they can choose not to do it demonstrates they have some type of agency against the deterministic framework of the brain and neurological processes that you would argue.
Determinists are not saying that you are bound by like your inherited biology.
It depends on who you're talking about, and you're making a generalized claim. Okay, so don't say determinist then, because actually many determinists do. I would assume that when you come into this
debate and you give me like some type of like refutation, it's like tailored to me and like.
Well, you have
right. So you've made some general like blanket like statement and said it replies to like determinists.
Well, that just demonstrates human agency. You asked me to demonstrate human agency. Multiple neuroscience arguments do that.
Can I finish?
You just asked me to demonstrate agency. Multiple neuroscience arguments have done that.
This like Andrew Wilson debate tactic is so old. There's so many
Andrew Wilson debate tactic?
But anyway,
what are you talking about?
So back to what I was saying. So in regards to like determinism in of itself, not all determinists have to entail that like I don't think any determinists entail that like you can't act differently than like in some way like your biology predicts. That's not true. And also,
actually, there are some that do.
Well,
yeah.
that's not mean. You're dating
I didn't
me.
say
So
that.
anyway,
did I say some that do, or did I say Xena?
If you're bringing in an argument, it should be a refutation against my point.
I'm saying
Anyway,
generally, regardless of the argument, you're talking about determinism.
So
you're talking about
reasons,
determinism. I said determinism, generally speaking. All right.
Okay.
So keep up. You're like 3 steps behind.
Okay. So when we talk about when someone acts against any type of like biological stimuli, there's still a reason for that is going to like bottom out in nurture. So that what you just brought up is not a refutation against determinism.
It is. The entire field of neuroscience, this is why they believe that there's human agency. This is why the philosophy of mind has adopted emergentism and believes that human agency is an irreducible fact.
Someone choosing against
so
some
you're
type
saying
of
that's not the case in the philosophy of mind right now.
I'm saying that what you're saying does not
in the philosophy of mind, you're saying that's not the case. The majority of philosophers in the philosophy of mind do not believe that human agency is an irreducible fact.
I think that if they meet it in the compatibilist
let's talk about
sense,
the field.
if we talk about a field, if they meet it in the compatibilist sense, that might be true. I think that a lot of neuroscientists and a lot of philosophers are like compatibilists, but I don't believe that they believe in this.
No, they are not.
No, I know for a fact actually most philosophers don't believe in libertarian free will. That's been like it's been debunked.
No, it's not.
Yes, it does.
No, it does. Okay, you're just making shit up right now because this is not even the case of academic.
You can look it up.
I actually write academic papers. I actually write books and stuff. So I actually deal in these circles and I deal with philosophers.
That makes me happy because it must not be that hard. Sorry.
Ad hominem already. Wow. So we're off to a great start.
You almost called me the R word earlier.
The R word? What?
Yeah, I heard.
Oh, retard? The R word.
I don't know if that's supposed to be.
We can
get back to the debate,
my gosh!
You guys want to debate
did your fifi? Yeah, did your fifis get hurt?
I didn't say I was hurt.
Well, it sounds like it.
It sounds like you were hurt when I ad hominemed you.
Well, my point is that it's a logical fallacy and demonstrates the infutility of your argument.
I don't even want to count how many times you've done that, but it's fine. Anyway, we can get back to
how many times I've said an ad hominem?
Yes.
How many? Tell me. How many times have I?
I love how you want to pivot.
Tell me how many times have I?
We're talking about free will.
That's my point.
Do you want to talk about free will?
Exactly.
Okay. So again, if someone acting against any type of biological stimuli does not entail free will, that means that the cause still bottoms out somewhere in like socialization or nurture. That's not like determinists don't say that like biology is the end all be all that makes your action. So
yeah, I know. And you have the environment and exterior stimuli. That's part of the worldview.
So when you say that like someone,
but the contrary again, it's necessary of the contrary logical argument here. If there is no human agency, you cannot have true rational deliberation. That's a fact.
What do you mean by true rational deliberation, by the way?
Being able to choose amongst different things and come to true knowledge claims.
Yeah, so you're not going to be the sole agent in like the things that you choose, in like in the credences that you have and the beliefs that you have. That's correct. However, people can speak and have discussions, and someone else, like using like their language, right, to sway your opinion. That happens all the time. So yes, debates can still happen.
So you believe that you're going to persuade people in a deterministic worldview with your deterministic argument?
It's a fact of being.
It's not a fact. It's not a fact. Okay, let's get into logic. So 2 + 2 = 4. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Is that always true?
What do you mean by always?
It past, present, and in the future. Is it a universal truth?
It depends. Like there's like an entire like debate over like whether we've like found math or it's always existed. Like for example, if there was no one to see it, like in the cosmos, and we had 2 particles like just like rolling around each other, does that mean 2? Like does that still exist? Does math still exist in that context? I think that math is probably something that we like observe and that we've kind of come to use like in a utility sense. But I don't think that I think there probably needs to be someone there counting for there to be 1 or 2 or 3 things. I think it's like there's some utility in math. So I don't necessarily think it's like something that you can quantify in this way of always existing. I think it's something that we kind of constructed.
So you're saying numbers are only dependent upon the things in the world?
I mean, if there's no things in the world, yeah, there's no number of things.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Numbers
are universal. Yeah, numbers pre-exist. Logic pre-exists creation. That's why creation is ordered in a logical way.
Okay, I would probably disagree.
Creation is not ordered in a logical way. Okay, do you believe in the laws of logic?
I think that the laws of logic are like we use them like utility-wise, right, to come to conclusions and to like
So they could be false in the future.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we've constructed a system.
Asking you a question. Okay, I'm asking you, could they be false in the future? That's what you're saying.
If the laws of physics stay constant, probably not. No.
So you think they are universal? That if the laws of physics stay the same, then the laws of logic
for
are
example, if you make a system, like, and like whatever conditions that precede the system continue to exist, it will continue to stay true. However, to say that like numbers and math, the way that we have like imagined it, has always existed, probably not. It's just a system. For example, today I could say that like, I don't know, like 2 + 2 = 5. And if everyone starts to kind of agree with those terms or whatever, we can make that a system that works. But I just don't think that like
how would that work? Because everything we build, engineering, geometry, all this stuff is based on actually numbers mean things. Again, they're built on logical principles. So to make my point is, you claiming that if we make 2 + 2 = 5, that somehow we can make that work. Actually, I mean, you can't.
More so,
you can't
I'm
because
more so
it defies logic.
I meant in a semantic sense. But like either way, 2 + 2 = 4 exists because it has some meaning that we gave it.
No, it has. It's not. We didn't give it meaning. That we discovered the laws of logic. We discovered mathematics. These things are universals and they're non-physical.
Yeah, this is just going to be like. I don't think it's like an actual tangible thing. I think most things that we see as things are tangible. I think it's an ideological system. I think it works. I think it's for pattern recognition, etc. But I don't think that we can in any way kind of like say that like this system existed before humans.
Right, and that's an entirely incoherent worldview. Again, this is what the people that use presuppositional apologetics or even presuppositional philosophy. This is what's called, the postmodern turn, is realizing that the modernist project is ended, and the history of metaphysics.
I don't want to talk about free will anymore.
What's that?
I just would really love to talk about free will.
Free will is tied with all this stuff. What are you talking about?
This is like you pivoting and going down this rabbit hole so that we never gets to actual.
This is all about free will. You cannot have rational deliberation, objective truth, and moral responsibility without free will. That's what we're talking about.
Every single day.
That's what we're talking about.
That this reality that we live in exists.
Okay, that's great. That your whole thing is a belief based on your assumption.
Yeah,
we've heard it.
That's wonderful. Everyone's doing that all the time, and you can say that things must be true.
We'd love to hear about your preferences, but that's all they are.
You're only saying that things are true because you don't like the opposite, and that.
No, I'm not.
Yes,
I'm saying that.
You're saying, dude,
the opposite can't exist. If you're right, there aren't objective truth claims.
Talking?
So that's my point.
In all of your arguments, you have not given any actual proof or evidence.
Sorry. Everybody watching this debate who's familiar with logic and philosophy knows exactly what's going on. And shout out to all you guys. God bless you all.
He continues to interrupt me, and I just...
What about this? Do you want to pose him some questions? Do you want to do an internal critique?
Yeah, let's do it.
I've been trying to do that. I'm trying to get at like what proof or evidence you have of human agency, and you've given me this neuroscience argument that I've already debunked, and you'll continue to say it over again. But again, how can you prove that human agency exists without referencing, because the outcome of the latter I don't like? What evidence do you have?
I never said
what evidence do you have for human agency?
I never said it was a preference. Let me finish.
Jesus Christ.
Just shut your mouth and let me finish.
Of course. Okay.
Thank you. About time. So the idea is, I'm using logic to demonstrate that the opposite, if your worldview is true, that we cannot actually have universal truth claims, and we can't have moral...
Do you have evidence for it?
Are you going to let me finish?
Do you have evidence for...
That's what logic is. Do you understand what a debate is premised on? Yeah, logic is not evidence. The laws of logic are not...
What do you think?
Oh my God.
Just, if you can, please let each other finish,
The laws of logic are not evidence. That's what the entire mathematics is built upon. So mathematics isn't evidence, logic isn't evidence, philosophy can't be evidence. The only thing that is evidence is if I just have a preference that I assume based on my external environment, and then I can come to some type of claim. That's wonderful. That's a really, really strong argument. My argument is that if free will doesn't exist, there is no objective truth claim, and there is no moral responsibility. And even in your worldview, I know that you act and move in the world as if those things are true. My point is your paradigm, the presuppositional paradigm, the lens in which we look at reality through, your presuppositional paradigm does not actually allow for objective truth and moral responsibility, and therefore, by definition, can't be true based on logical premises.
Okay.
Logical premises are the argument that I'm making.
If we could have turned back the clock 5 minutes ago when, I don't know, you're probably raising your voice or something like that.
Probably.
If we could have done that, could you have chosen differently? If everything was the same, there's no interference, no different cause coming in, could you have stood up and gone to the bathroom?
Yeah, I can. I'm a free agent. Yeah,
Why?
I can make choices.
Why?
Again, for me, I'm going to appeal back to a theological system in which we're made in the image of God, and then utilize that premise to say, if that is true, therefore we can have objective truth, therefore we can have moral responsibility, therefore we can have a totalizing metaphysics that deals with being itself and unity.
So because you were made in the image of God, you have free will. That's your kind of your...
Well, fundamentally, yeah.
Okay. So being made in the image of God means that you have free will. Okay. So, and this like, again, it's kind of like the same idea of like a soul, like this idea of like the agency thing. This is where people say that like it's given to you by God, and then people are kind of like, you know, thus can kind of live with it, etc. The soul, like, do you agree that there's some type of soul?
Of course, I'm an Orthodox Christian. Are you familiar with Eastern Orthodoxy in any matter?
If that's true, is everyone's soul different? Like when, let's say I'm born, do I have a different soul from someone else that prompts me to do different things, or is everyone's soul the same?
So I believe in a form of Aristotelian hylomorphism. Do you familiar with what that is?
Nope.
Okay, so hylomorphism, these have to do with theories, and this theory is it's utilized more and more frequently in the philosophy of mind. And hylomorphism argues that soul actually gives form to the body. And so form is dependent upon the existence of soul. And that's exactly what we as Orthodox Christians would believe, is that the soul is actually what's giving rise to the body. And so our anthropology as a human being is soul, body, and nous. Nous being the eyes of the soul, the eyes of the heart.
So
be your noetic faculty, your mind, imagination, these types of things.
Does everyone born with a different kind of soul?
Yeah, everybody has their own soul, yeah.
Okay, and God gives it to them?
Of course.
And your soul causes you to act differently than other people?
Your soul allows you to have free agency. It does. Again, the use cause is trying to put it in a sort of deterministic framework. Where you're going, I already caught it.
Okay, no, it's not a caught thing. You just don't like the wording of the same thing, right? But again, so if everyone's soul if everyone's soul is different, what does that mean?
Everybody is a unique person.
Meaning that they act differently, right?
They can act differently, or they could act similarly, or they could act the same.
So everyone has a different soul, and this soul, is what is also entailed as this agency or whatever. But this agency, everyone's agency is different. Everyone's soul is different. So essentially, the soul can prompt different actions and different outcomes in different people. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. If your soul is given to you from God and it can prompt different actions within you than other people, this means that there's something entailed in that soul that you were given by God that is causing you to act differently than other people, meaning that you're not the arbiter of it.
No, that's not. That's a non sequitur. That actually is not a logical follow.
Saying that word a lot.
No, well, because you keep falling victim to non sequiturs.
No, it's
and
not.
So just because God gave you a soul, or even God foreknows the end of history, does not actually entail determinism.
Yes, it does.
No, it does not.
Yes, it does.
So you understand that God is outside space and time, right?
Yep.
And so the difference is actually watching the choices that we've already made is not the same thing as making us make the choice.
He doesn't have to watch
when you go to a restaurant and there's only certain items on the menu, are you determined to choose something, or is actually there's a set of opportunities to make choice?
It's not opportunities. It's not
opportunities.
No.
So when you tell me
how you choose when you go to omniscience, when we talk about omniscience, right? If God does not need to be seeing everything in linear time to know what will always happen, right? If you just look at just the story of anyone in the Bible, like Noah from Noah's Ark, he already knew everything that was going to happen, and thus Noah could not have acted outside of God's knowledge.
No, he could. He could have chose not to listen to God. That's the whole point of being a Christian, is that we're aligning our will with God's will. That's the whole point of being a Christian.
God knew that he would not act in accordance with God, correct? God knew that Noah would not act in accordance with God.
God, as outside space and time, knew that Noah would make the choice, but Noah making the choice is not dependent. God didn't force him to make the choice.
Okay.
Again, those are two. That's a category. That's a logical category error.
I didn't even get to make the argument.
That's a category error.
I didn't make the error that you're trying to.
That's a category. You said that omniscience demands determinism.
So again, if God knew, he doesn't have to be looking at this from a linear perspective of time. But if he always knew, he's omnipotent, omnipresent, whatever. Mm-hmm. If he always knew what Noah could do, by definition, Noah could not do what God did not know he would do, aka God knew there was some path that everyone was going to have. God knew what their future would hold, what their present would hold, what their past would hold, whatever. There's some future that existed for Noah, and he could not have acted out of accordance with it because God already knew it.
But God knowing does not entail causation of him causing the person to choose it.
I'm saying that he couldn't have acted differently. I do think there is an argument for causation.
No, that's a category error because God is out.
Can you do something that God does not know you will do?
He's outside space and time, so he's already looking at history as a finished, completed thing. He knows the choices I'm going to make before I've made them, but that doesn't mean that I did not have free will to make my choices.
Can you do something that God does not know you will do?
No, because God's already outside space and time, but again, that doesn't necessarily that's not causal necessity.
I just raised my hand. God knew I was going to raise my hand. Could I have not risen my hand?
You could have, and then God would have known that that's what you were going to not. No, it's not, because that's a category error. You could have chose not to not raise your hand, and God would have known that's what you already chose.
No.
Exactly. On your own premise, you just contradicted yourself. Yes, you did.
We have a past, a present, and a future.
You just contradicted yourself.
We have a past and a present and a future, right?
Thank you.
I could not have risen my hand.
Or you could have, or could not have. God being outside space and time would already have known.
Because I didn't, though, right? So if we look at that means that I couldn't have. Right? So if we look at like what God knows, if God knows some like events are going to happen, you cannot do whatever he wants. For example, if God knows, let's say tomorrow God knows that I'm going to pick a blue shirt. That means that tomorrow I cannot pick a pink shirt because God knows.
But you're putting the cart before the horse, because God only knows it because he's outside space and time, and for him you've already made the decision.
No, he doesn't already know it. He knows it because he knows it because he's
he knows it because he's outside space and time.
No, God doesn't have any conditions.
The action's already happened for him.
God does not have any conditions.
God has already seen the action.
Wait, guys, one at a time. Go ahead.
Okay. I think that you're thinking of God in some type of like human perspective, in that someone has to know things by having seen them play out or in some way.
God
knows things because he's all knowledgeable.
Sure.
Not because he's sitting at the end of the finish line and looking back and can replay clips.
That's my worldview, so why don't you debate me instead of just this general concept? That's exactly what we as Orthodox Christians understand. We as Orthodox Christians, that's exactly how we believe it to be, is that God is not a causal necessity for every decision I make. I have free agency, I have free will, and God being outside space and time, being the beginning of the Alpha, the beginning of creation and the meaning of creation, the Omega, he has already seen the choices that we make. Yeah, that doesn't mean that I'm putting I'm not anthropomorphizing God, because that's not something that humans can actually.
Go ahead.
That's not something that humans can actually do. So the idea that that's an anthropomorphization of God is ridiculous, because that's not even how we understand.
What does it mean to be omnipotent and omniscient? What do those two things mean?
Omnipowerful.
Okay, and
all-knowing.
All-knowing, right? So where in that definition does it say that God knows everything, not because he's all-knowing, but because he's able to sit like at the end of time and just know all the events because he can see them all. Like I don't think that's like it's not because of some chronological order, but because all knowledge is bestowed to him.
Sure.
Right? So that doesn't mean
he is the source of knowledge.
Exactly. He's the source of knowledge, and he knows all things that will exist. So it's not because he was able to like watch, in his head like how everything was. He can do this, but it's not because he could watch in his head like all of history play out, and then he knew, okay, she's going to do this. It's because he knows, right? So it's like,
what's the difference exactly?
Right, because you're saying that if you didn't raise your hand, right, God would have known.
You could have done either one, yeah.
No,
and God would have known.
True,
yeah.
Right?
How is that not true? You could have done either one.
Okay, so I'm saying that we couldn't have done either one because God knew I was going to do that one thing. There's not multiple realities.
No,
the reality
God knowing, that's a logical non sequitur. Just because he knows what we choose does not mean that our choice is totally dependent and he forces us to choose it.
Can you do what God does not know you will do?
God already knows the decision I make before I've made it. He knows the decisions I'm going to make in 10 years from now. I haven't even made them yet. And that's part of the judgment. That's part of the life of a Christian, is God made humanity in the Imago Dei so that we can participate in these categories that animals do not have. So for us, that would include love, logic, reason, truth, mercy, compassion, honor, glory. These are called uncreated energies of God, and these are the things in which differentiate us from the animal kingdom and differentiate us from operating purely based on instincts or in a deterministic way that's framed through nature and nurture. Why don't you let me finish something so you can actually argue what I'm talking about?
No.
So what? 2 minutes?
So I can't respond.
We're in a debate. Guys, God forgive me. I said something more than 2 minutes. Oh my God.
Jesus Christ. I wonder if y'all, anyway. So again, decisions that you've made, God, before you ever made them, God knew you were going to make them, correct? Before you even made the decision to come here today, God knew you were going to do that, correct?
Yes, that's where providence comes in.
So if God knew you were going to do that, you could have not come here.
No, because I've already made the choice from God's perspective. He's outside space and time. I've already made the choice.
So that means that you could not have decided not to come because God knew before you came that you were going to come here.
No. God's knowledge does not determine my choices.
Okay.
He knows my choices because I chose them.
By definition, they do. So now
no,
you're
it
saying
doesn't by definition. It doesn't make any sense. That's not a logical argument.
If he knew them before you chose them, then he doesn't know them because you chose them.
He knows them because I chose them, yes.
So you said earlier that he knew them before you chose them. So that was a contradiction.
Yes, but I still have free will and causal agency. Right. That's the whole idea of repentance.
Can you acknowledge that you just contradicted yourself?
Let me finish. Really, she says a question. So that's the whole premise of a Christian worldview in regard to repentance, moral responsibility, objective truth. And so without those things, so it's like you're arguing that the Christian paradigm somehow doesn't allow for free will because God's omnipotent and omniscient.
Yes.
And I'm saying that does not make any sense at all because the entire paradigm is built upon the idea that we have causal agency made in the image of God. That's the entire worldview of a Christian.
So I love that this is live streamed and also going to be on YouTube so we can just rewind to the point where you said that God knows things before you make the decision.
Yeah, he's outside space and time.
No. Then I want to be able to speak because I've let you do
then speak.
Rant. Okay. So we know that God knows the things that you are going to do before that you do them, right? And then you said that God only knows these things because you did them. So that is a complete contradiction, right?
What I'm saying is
so can you acknowledge that contradiction?
His knowledge does not
answering my question.
His knowledge does not determine the choices I make.
You're not answering.
So just because he knows the choices I make does not determine what choices I actually choose.
You're not answering my question.
Restate your question.
Is it that God knows things before you? Does God know the decisions that you make before you make them, or does God know them because you make them?
Both, essentially, because again, he's outside space and time. This is a non-temporal form of knowledge.
So it is true that God...
You got to let him answer the question.
You're using temporal frameworks to talk about God's omniscience, and that makes no sense. The point is, we actually can make free will choices.
Okay.
God knows the choices we're going to make. And that doesn't determine what the choices that we make.
Contradiction in those
No,
statements.
it doesn't.
Yes.
No, it doesn't.
So you posited that God knows things that you're going to do before you do them. Then that means that if God knows something that you're going to do before you do it, you cannot do anything other than that.
Let her finish.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I never said anything about forcing. I said that if God knows the things that you're going to do before that you do them, you cannot do anything other than the thing that he knows that you're going to do.
That would entail a sense of force, that God can force you.
Hold on, let him finish.
That would entail a sense of force or a deterministic worldview that you cannot choose to do the opposite, and I'm saying that's not the case.
Okay,
that's
so
not
God
what we believe.
Hold on. Let each other finish,
God
please.
is outside space and time, so he knows all the decisions that we've made. Okay. We are inside space and time. So God is outside space and time.
Let him finish.
Therefore, at the end of history, he can already see the choices we make, and that is a present reality for God right now. So you keep referring back to a temporal metaphor in regards to his omniscience, and that somehow we cannot make a choice because God already knows that that's the choice we're going to make. And again, that is a logical non sequitur because he's outside the temporal categories that you're using.